Oh, hold up. Hold up. Why is that not working? Uh, doo. It was busted. There we go. And we're back.
Welcome to
Yay!
episode 198 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
We are joined by our adventurous game master and Mutants and Masterminds developer for Green Ronin, Crystal Frazier.
Hi, everybody.
Nice to have you on the show formally, Crystal. We're usually so casual.
Yes, well, I've been on the show before. This is just the first time you've had me on since I stopped being a Paizo employee.
That's true. Anything... Well, so you stopped being a Paizo employee,
Yes.
but you were already with Green Ronin in some capacity, weren't you?
Yes, I've been working for Green Ronin part-time for 2.5 years. Started out just freelancing on Mutants and Masterminds, and then took over the line itself because I am a giant fan of superheroes.
Cool. Now, before we get too deep into that, because I do want to catch up with you in like your professional capacity, we're talking about cartoons today. We're talking about how cartoons can influence and improve your game. What makes you so qualified to talk about cartoons, Crystal?
I have a bachelor's degree in cartoons.
Wait, really?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in animation and... Oh, bloody hell. What is on that stupid degree? Media arts and animation. It's been a long time since I got it out.
Wow, that is cool. Like I've always known you as some kind of expert. I didn't realize that you were an accredited expert on cartoons.
I'm this close to being a doctor of cartoons.
Why did you stop when you were that close?
Finances, mostly.
Oh, but it's the world's loss that we can't call you a cartoon doctor.
Also, those giant cartoon tongue depressors are surprisingly expensive. And as are the thermometers that explode.
So what made you pursue that?
I've always been huge into animation. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful art form that doesn't get enough credit for what it does. It all stems from a childhood trauma, and that turned into an obsession, and that turned into like really appreciating the art and the academic aspects of it.
Justin Franklin in chat has basically my same thoughts. He said he thought you just watched a lot of cartoons.
Well, I did that too, but when I was 2 or 3, my parents let me watch Gremlins.
Oh,
Okay.
well, that's...
Because they thought it would be a kid's movie, and it horribly scarred my young intellect, and I refused to watch anything live action for 3 or 4 years after that, and in that time I just became obsessed with animation, and it never really went away.
I know there were a fair chunk of 80s movies that were like, this is fine for kids, and when we look back on it now, it's like, probably wasn't, but 2 or 3 for Gremlins.
It had an adorable, fuzzy... Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Gremlins was one of the movies quoted as being responsible for the PG-13 rating existing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was a few decades short of PG-13.
So what's a typical semester when you were getting your degree like?
Part of it is almost like getting a film degree where you learn about, film production, about the history of film, about, the language of film, things like that. And then I also took animation classes in addition to that. So I learned about like hand animating, computer animation, stop motion animation, like all the technical ins and outs. I produced a couple of student films, and in addition to that, I had a bunch of specifically history classes related to animation that were all electives.
So
Now,
what?
I know, as someone who follows you on social media, I've benefited from your education in the field, but do you feel like you've really gotten your degree's worth?
Well, I don't work in animation, so probably not, but I still really enjoy the medium, and unlike gaming and comics, which I do for a living now and have all this drama attached to them, I can mostly enjoy animation with less stress.
Comics
It's not
are
work.
just storyboards for animation.
So what is it like when you're academically examining animation as opposed to just casually doing so with a bowl of cereal on Saturday morning?
Well, a lot of it is kind of like you might analyze film if you're a film critic. I mean, you look at how the narrative is woven together. You think about what ended up in every shot, because I mean, the traditional wisdom in film is everything that is in a shot is there by conscious choice. But that's a lie, because things end up in the background of shots all the time that weren't supposed to be there. But with animation, everything has to be deliberately drawn in. So everything in the backgrounds, everything in the foreground, every movement, every facial expression is either a deliberate choice or a compromise people had to make because they were running out of time, or because they put the intern somewhere and didn't turn out great, or you had access to this amazing legendary animator, but you could only afford 3 minutes of animation from him.
Is that a specific example?
Yes, I am.
I think I know the example you're going for.
Well, do you want to speculate while she looks it up, Karen?
I didn't realize I was going to have to come up with academic examples.
What did you think you were doing here? Just talking cartoons, Crystal?
Well, I thought we were going to talk about cartoons and their structure and their narratives. I didn't know I'd have to get into the academics about it. I haven't had to use my degree in a while.
We definitely will, but you intrigued me with that example. It was just so specific.
Is it James? Are you thinking about James Baxter?
Yes, thank you. James Baxter, the animation he did for Adventure Time and the Steven Universe season finale. And they are both, I don't know if you're a fan of either of those shows, but there's one episode where they got Stephen Baxter, this legendary animator, just renowned in the industry for his like fluid, amazing, gorgeous movements, to do this scene of Stephen like embracing himself, which happens for complicated plot reasons that are full of spoilers.
Yeah.
And the movement is just so fluid and natural without the sort of stiltedness you get from rotoscope animation, and it's beautiful enough that it made me cry.
Yeah, it's incredible. Also, it has a very high frame rate with this very fluid motion. And in animation, you know that when they go do high frame rate scenes, that those are very expensive scenes that take a lot of time to put together. I would totally recommend that any fan of animation at all go look up this scene, but it is basically a spoiler of the entire plot line of Steven Universe's entire series, so do so with caution. Like it's the series finale, except for they got renewed anyway, so it was supposed to be the series finale.
You said he also did something like that on Adventure Time?
Yes, if you go,
is that a less spoilery example people could look up?
Yes, the James Baxter episode they did it with Adventure Time is almost completely unrelated to the meta plot. You can go and enjoy that just on its own. And I think I keep getting his first name wrong.
James?
James.
So I'm not familiar with James Baxter by name. Would I know his work?
Probably.
This is the last academic question that we're going to talk about.
Yes, he's you would know his work. I mean, outside of Disney, you would know his work from the early DreamWorks 2D animation, so the different Bible movies they were doing early on. So, what were they?
The Prince of Egypt?
Yes, Prince of Egypt. That's what they called their Passover movie. And Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. What was the one they had for that?
I think that's what they called it.
Code of Dreams.
Code of Dreams? You sure?
I think.
Okay, he was primary animator for Belle on Beauty and the Beast, primary animator for Ariel on Little Mermaid. He did Moses for Prince of Egypt. He was primary animator for Sinbad and Sinbad's The Legend of Seven Seas. An underrated cartoon.
A hidden gem.
Yeah, that's a great cartoon to watch if you haven't. He's worked, basically it's a giant list of box office smashes in animation. Throughout the entire history of animation. It's like Little Mermaid, DuckTales, Rescuers, Lion King, Hunchback, Prince of Egypt, El Dorado, Shrek, more recently, Mary Poppins Returns, Steven Universe, Adventure Time, Kung Fu Panda, Gravity Falls. Basically, everything successful in theaters in the last 20 years of animation.
And television.
So let's cross over now to gaming.
Yes.
In fact, let's follow your timeline. You got this degree in animation and media arts, and you ended up a game designer. This is what I think you're best known for. I know you also for a lot of your comic work, but I mean, this is a gaming podcast, so I think our audience is most familiar with your gaming stuff. How did that crossover happen, and how does one inform the other?
Well, actually, I started as a game designer first. I started as a game designer first in the late 90s, and that was informative, but it was an experience that kind of drove me away from the industry for a few years. And then after that, I decided I needed to go to school and get a degree, so I originally wanted to learn more about... I wasn't sure if I was going to study creative writing or film, and along the way I discovered that this media arts degree was a thing, so I opted for that.
And then you circled back to game design at some point.
Yes, that was mostly accidental.
So
I think I've told the story a few... Oh,
sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think I've told the story a few times of how I accidentally ran into Sarah Robinson, the art director for Paizo, like washing my hands in a public bathroom one day, and at the time I was interested in self-publishing but didn't know anything about InDesign. So I'd offered to come work for her as an intern for a couple of weeks to learn InDesign. And that led to my 9-year tenure at Paizo.
And that's where we come in.
Yes. And that's how I met you, Ryan, and you, Param.
Yay!
And we're all better off for it.
So, yeah, always wash your hands in the bathroom. You could get a job out of it.
That's all I do in the bathroom.
That is not the strangest how I got in the game design story we've heard. It honestly, I know we give all this advice about how to do it professionally, but a lot of it just seems to be accidentally you'll find yourself a game designer, and like it honestly needs one of those public service announcements. So you found yourself accidentally a game designer. How do you survive in this weird and new world?
We really need a vaccination against this. It's the only way to keep our children safe.
Side effects include poverty and horrible social abuse on public media.
All right, Crystal, I think I best know you for, like, as far as your taste in cartoons, I best know you for Ninja Turtles. But would you say that's your favorite cartoon?
Oh, it is very difficult to narrow it down to one. If I had a favorite, Tailspin? Maybe?
Oh, okay.
Or Batman Animated, or...
Good call.
Troll Hunters would be really high up there.
Okay.
Steven Universe.
Let's focus on Tailspin, because I love hearing people try to explain Tailspin to people that don't know it.
Oh,
So what is your take on Tailspin's premise?
All right, it's the Jungle Book, but it's post-World War I, and everybody has planes.
And like all land is just mostly tiny islands now, right?
Yes, it's set in the South Pacific. It's an animated version of Tales of the Golden Monkey.
And you said it's Jungle Book, but take out the main character and one of the secondary characters, and everybody else from that movie is in. It's like, I don't know how that show got pitched. I don't know.
I do, actually,
so
because
confused. Oh,
this is
good.
my degree. It was originally supposed to be a Launchpad spin-off.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Originally, as DuckTales was winding down, they wanted to take that same fire and spin it off into something on its own. It had a stealth pilot in one late season episode where Double O Duck, where Launchpad becomes a spy for one episode. They were originally trying to float, how well Launchpad can carry a series on his own, and the answer was okay. So originally, that's why the whole focus of the series is, flying around in planes and having air battles and air pirates and things like that. And then when they realized Launchpad wasn't really, getting kids excited, they looked at what properties were really popular, and Jungle Book had just had its theatrical re-release, and they went with that.
Okay, that doesn't really answer why they would do that, but at least I understand what happened a little better.
But because they had all of this pitch work already done, and they needed
Yeah.
something to fill the time slot.
And then, so Launchpad ended up on Darkwing Duck instead?
Yep.
Did someone just love Launchpad at Disney?
I mean, that's not uncommon in creative fields for
Yeah.
people to have pet characters that they push into shows where they may or may not belong.
I know on G.I. Joe, and I did not know if I would actually be able to bring G.I. Joe up in this episode, but there we go. Flint Dille likes to include Flint in every episode because he was pretty sure they named the character after him.
Pretty sure?
Yeah, that's the quote. The quote is that he was pretty sure they named the character after him, and he liked to use it as often as possible.
And I love how you were unsure that you were going to get to bring up G.I. Joe, one of the most iconic cartoons of all time, in our episode specifically about cartoons.
Listen, I know I bring up G.I. Joe a lot, but I try not to shoehorn it into episodes. And when I was thinking of examples of how what we would talk about, G.I. Joe's just was not making the list. The only jumping or the connecting point between G.I. Joe and gaming that I always do is file cards are a great way to write a backstory because it's nice and concise and it really sums up important details of the character. But I've made that point several times in the past, so it didn't feel like it was worth bringing up again.
It's a good point to revisit, though, especially in light of the episode subject.
Yes, but we've talked a lot about backstories in the last couple of episodes, controversially so.
How are backstories controversial?
Don't ask.
No,
We
no,
can't
no,
go
no.
there again.
Nope. Sorry. I have some in the box with my questions.
But cartoons can help make your game better. There's a lot of things that, especially the format of role-playing games, that the traditional structures of cartoons can really help aid and sort of shortcut a lot of your game and help it really cement it in your players' heads.
Yeah, one of the big things in animation is sort of a depersonalization, an abstraction of characters. Scott McCloud writes a little bit about it in his books about comics, where the more simplified you make the language around your characters, the more they become sort of an everyman figure that viewers can pour themselves into. And part of that is also sort of refining a core characteristic or two to be like an important central tenet to the character. With live action, most of your characters have a lot of nuance and a lot of development, and you can get that in animation too, but everything about a character's look and voice acting and writing in animation are built around this core concept first. And I feel like it's a good lesson for role-playing games where you can come up with one or two core concepts and then build complexity around it.
And that's super important because a lot of times in a role-playing game, you only have a few moments to really get across the deal of your character or an NPC, and you just need to get them established enough that you can develop them more later, which a cartoon will do. You will start off with the very basic structure of a character, and then they will grow deeper as they get more exposure time across the show. And that's a great way to think about when you're starting up a character for your game is get up something that they will catch as a hook and then slowly add to it so that the hook isn't the only thing that defines your character.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, this works especially well for villains that, as a GM, you have to get across what they are inside of maybe a sentence or two of backstory. So, like, if we're going with Tailspin, think about Don Carnage. Like, you don't really have any time for nuance with Don Carnage. You don't have any... there's not really a lot of nuance to his character, but he's beloved because he is... Every line of dialogue he has just chews the scenery with that, like, beautiful, like, thick accent and, like, his glorious over-the-top, like, love for himself and, like... all at the same time, you're vaguely afraid of this guy, but he is also comical, and they can bring that across in just about every line.
And you're right about the afraid. They do such a good job of that character when they decide to remind you that he is dangerous. And that is something you can really enjoy as a GM, is if you can buy somebody on the hooks of the character and get them to think one way of the character. When you do that twist and the horrible evil clown stabs me in the gut in the dark and your campaign, Crystal, we all get the shock of, oh no, that clown we kind of liked is actually evil.
Never trust the clown! Yeah, true facts. My father and brother have both worked as clowns.
Oh goodness, how did you survive?
Because I'm a little more vicious than an evil clown.
I can kind of believe it. Now, the absolutely and also a lot of cartoons have a lot of core archetypes that they like to frame a bunch of their characters in. And do you think it's valuable for a GM to have a set of core archetypes, be aware of them, so that they can fast hurry and get an NPC on the field?
Oh yeah, it absolutely helps to have basically like you said, a core archetype, and mix that with maybe one unusual motivation or backstory element or something like that. Sometimes something as simple as an accent or a vocal affectation, because then if you're on the spot for an NPC, you can just throw that out there. I know the one that pops up again and again in animation is the Four Humors, and that's really easy shorthand for a diverse group, because you've got your sanguine character who is, lovable and likable. Your Michelangelos. You've got your melancholic characters who are. I'm trying to remember my Four Humors now. Somebody want to back me up here? Black bile, yellow bile. Not melancholy. Blood and. Oh dear. I really should have studied more for this episode.
I mean, you're the one that going for the deep academic draws here, Crystal.
No, this is a really good analysis, because the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are basically the Four Humors distilled out into a team. And you see,
we've got it in chat.
Variation.
Blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile.
Yes, phlegm is the one I always manage to forget, but phlegmatic. This was required reading at Paizo too. I can't believe I'm choking and forgetting this, but
choking on your phlegm.
But yeah, it basically distills down to the type A control freak who needs to have some feeling of control and be in charge. Your lovable, kind of goofy one. Your sarcastic, aggressive one who's got, some flavor of carnal appetite that needs to be sated, violence or romance or things like that. And then your sort of introverted intellectual. And I can't remember which assigns to which.
Alternate version of how it's written. So sanguine, phlegmatic, caloric, and melancholic.
Yep.
Okay. That one makes more sense than figuring out black and yellow bile and how they metaphor.
Yeah, I just can't remember which applies to which personality trait now, which I should, because I even listened to a podcast about bogus old medical theories. So I've studied this from 3 different angles.
So according to
I just have a
Oh, sorry. According to Explorable. According to Explorable.com, Caloric, the yellow bile, is the irritable character. Melancholic, the black bile, is the depressed character. Sanguine, the blood fluid, is the optimistic character. And phlegmatic, the phlegm fluid, is the calm character. So
phlegmatic would be Donatello?
I think phlegmatic would be Leonardo, but I need to go back and check, because there's more personality traits with them than the
Donatello.
And I don't want to Google in the middle of.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Donatello is probably melancholic because he's depressed a lot.
Yeah, but it's also more introspective and thoughtful and deliberate. Nope, not gonna Google it. Not gonna Google it. That's not good TV.
Thankfully, we edit this.
Time talking about Ninja Turtles now.
Yeah. So, what other lessons can we learn from Ninja Turtles specifically that makes our games better?
I think one of the most valuable lessons you can learn from Ninja Turtles is that if your crew foils the exact same villain every single time, that villain stops becoming dangerous real fast. But I guess we could learn that same lesson from Cobra if we want to go back to G.I. Joe
Astroman.
or Megatron.
Does that? But that can go back to what we said. Like they abuse this in the comics a lot, where the TV show really established that you can make a joke of they're the same villains over and over and over again, and then when the comics twist it and Bebop just totally does bad things to Donatello, and you're like, what? No, this isn't supposed to happen. This isn't what I was signed up for.
Yeah, but in the comics, they also don't appear every single issue. Bebop and Rocksteady especially only show up and fight the Turtles like maybe 4 times so far? 5 times? When they killed Donatello, that was maybe the 2nd or 3rd time they showed up. And every time they show up, the Turtles are like, we can't stop these guys! They're too stupid to hurt!
I know a common complaint from GMs is that they can't get recurring villains because they just can't get their villains to survive fights. But it almost sounds like maybe that's for the advantage, because if the villain shows up 2 or 3 more times, eventually they're either going to become too big of a threat or just can't be taken seriously.
Yeah, a lot of that boils down to game design. In a game like D&D or Pathfinder, where the only way to stop somebody generally is to take away all their hit points, and we've equated taking away all of their hit points to death, then yeah, it's hard to have a villain survive unless, it was a doppelganger you fought this time, or, there's a convenient getaway spell, a contingency spell already set up for when they get seriously injured or things like that.
And that's another thing we can learn from Ninja Turtles, because Ninja Turtles have basically been on TV for the last 30 years with only like a couple of year gaps in between. But every reboot, the concept stays the same, but the tone changes. And so that's a good way of looking at, like, what kind of game do you want? Do you want 80s Ninja Turtles, where maybe you don't give a penalty for dealing non-lethal damage because it's a lighter tone and it's kind of a friendlier tone? Or do you want to go more for the 90s one, where, or I guess it was early 2000s one?
Early 2000s, yeah.
Yeah, where it's like, no, let's take it a little more serious. Let's ratchet up the lethality, etc. Like, just same concept, different tone, completely changes how your campaign plays out.
Yeah. Oh God, the 2000s series, they decapitate Shredder in like episode 9 or 10.
But isn't he just a small alien controlling a robot body, or is that the next Shredder?
First of all, spoilers.
Oh, really?
How dare you spoil this 15-year-old show?
You spoiled it first.
Okay, yes, but the thing is, you don't know that you don't understand the Shredders in Utrom and when Leonardo chops his head off. You just see it in silhouette, like at the end of this climactic fight. Like, Leonardo jumps past him and then his head just flips back. So it looks like they just went seriously badass.
I love that, like, I could picture the argument with the censor where they're like, you can't do that. It's like, oh, but he didn't decapitate a guy, because after the traumatic thing happens, we find out it didn't actually happen.
Yeah, I know that twist gets catches a lot of flack online, but I like it because it gives Shredder in the 2000 series his own flavor. Like, he's kind of his own guy. He's not necessarily strictly tied to the Turtles just by virtue of, like, running the same clan. He's got his own weirdness going on that extends beyond them.
I've always kind of seen him as a blending of the most threatening parts of Krang and Shredder.
Yes.
The stuff you forget about because they both become jokes pretty early on in the 80s series, but like, conceptually, those are both terrifying concepts.
Oh, that original miniseries where, like, before Krang gets his giant robot baby body and he's just this like gooey brain on a little rolly office chair. God, he is terrifying.
I love that giant robot baby body. There's certain things that I'm a fan of despite the terribleness, and then there's things I'm a fan of because of the terribleness, and Krang's robot body is one of those things where it's like, does not make sense why he made this giant robot in those colors with sunglasses for some reason.
I have a Mega Bloks version of the giant baby robot body sitting, like, right there.
I considered picking it up, like, every week for years, and it was no longer in stores. I regretted never picking it up.
It is glorious, and I'm so sorry. I have obsessively collected the Mega Bloks Ninja Turtle sets, and there's at this point only like 2 or 3 that I'm missing.
I was buying the blind bags, and I think that's it. I don't think I only own things from the blind bags, but the blind bags were fun.
Oh yeah,
I like Mega Bloks miniatures better than minifigs.
I actually do too.
Yeah, there we go. Controversial opinions left and right on the podcast lately.
Oh man, we're gonna get so much hate mail, specifically from Dutch viewers.
We might as well wrap up by talking about the more, I guess not the most recent, but the more recent Ninja Turtles cartoon. And by wrap up, I mean wrap up Ninja Turtles. We've still got plenty of time to talk about other things.
We can also talk about the Rise of the TMNT. I think it's a fun show. I know a lot of people are less fans of it than other series, but
that's the Saban one, right?
I don't remember who produces it. That might be
the live action one.
Oh no, that's the Next Mutation. I struggled through that one as well.
Which one's Rise?
Rise of the TMNT is the newest one with the sort of a graffiti style.
Okay.
2D animated. It's on Nickelodeon.
The turtles are different types of turtles. There's a box
Yes.
turtle and a snapping turtle and a soft
they
shell
have very
turtle.
different profiles.
Like Donatello's a leatherback. He doesn't have his own shell, so he has a mech shell he wears.
Yeah, and Raph is a snapping turtle, and he's just like this giant hulking.
It's the very least Raph I've ever seen, but he kind of works.
He's pretty Raph. And they've got fairly different personalities, but I still think it's an interesting take on the characters. I can see how you'd arrive at all of the character decisions. And I like like I said, the sort of graffiti-inspired art. There's a lot of squash and stretch and distortion in the way they move that makes it feel very like frenetic and action-packed.
So it did turn me off when I saw, like, as it was being revealed and stuff. It's like, this just doesn't feel like I was never violently against it, but it never felt like something I would get into. But I did happen to come across an episode one time, and I watched it, and it also still did not appeal to me. So
I was hoping for a callback on this one.
no, it was really just like, yeah, all right, this is about what I expected, not my Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, it's not going to be for everybody. I enjoy it. I have not gotten to see a lot of episodes of it just because it is difficult to find it streaming anywhere, and I don't have cable. So,
But
That's still only on its first season, isn't it?
I think they might be in second season, but they do a lot of episodes per season.
And I hate to call back to this, but that's actually a lesson that a lot of gamers need to learn too, is that just because, like, no, this isn't your game, this isn't your style of play, you're not into it, you're not obligated to be, but just that these aren't your Ninja Turtles doesn't mean that the fans of the new Ninja Turtles are not fans of Ninja Turtles. The people that play Champions don't get to hate on the Mutants and Masterminds players just because their game doesn't require 8 million D6.
Yeah, we have a much better system, so how can they make fun of us? Sorry, I used to play Champions. I still love the system. Please, God, don't come for me. I love Steve Long. He's a very nice man.
Well, I don't want to gloss over the Nickelodeon Ninja Turtles, because I do think that that's probably the closest in tone to how I run campaigns.
Yeah,
it has a nice balance of humor and seriousness, and occasionally delves into body horror that just feels completely out of place.
I don't know if it's super out of place, but yeah, the 2012 series is my favorite. They're really well-developed characters, the atmosphere is gorgeous, the animation is beautiful.
The toys are awesome.
The toys are awesome. I've got a collection of every single April O'Neil, stretching all the way back to the 87 series.
Nice.
So, yeah. And I also have the Rise of the TMNT April, and I love her. But yeah, I also have the 2012 series, and I know they caught a lot of flack early on for making April a teenager in this one, but I, again, think it works really well and gives more reasons for her to be hanging out with a bunch of teenagers.
Yeah, I agree. Like, when they introduced teenage April O'Neil, you then realize, oh, that was like an older woman hanging out with 4 teenagers.
Yeah.
And Sensei, like, that's a little weird. That's a weird
it's
relationship dynamic.
The old dynamic was like she's 24 or 26 and hanging out with a bunch of 15-year-olds, and I mean, I've hung out with 15-year-olds.
One of the unfortunate things about that series is that when they introduced Casey Jones, April went back to being the damsel in distress, whereas the first season was all setting up to her being the new apprentice to the Ninja Turtles and Splinter.
Yeah, and she did.
That was a
they
downer.
Did develop that a bit. She ends up a pretty good kunoichi by the 4th or 5th season.
I've only seen the 2 seasons that are on Canadian Netflix.
Okay. Towards the end, they introduce Karai in season 1, but later on they introduce one of Karai's friends, who's another kunoichi, who focuses on the psychic attacks, and April can hold her own against her pretty well. Shinigami, that's her name.
Speaking of Aprils that I'm rather fond of, the CGI TMNT, I really like the ending when April just goes full ninja. At the like, no damsel, no sideline character, just full straight up ninja time right now.
Yep.
No explanation.
That was meant to be an extension
those are my favorite toys. The ones based on that movie. Mm-hmm. I just really like the aesthetic of that show. That movie.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. The thing that GMs can learn from that is to actually make your campaigns about the PCs, because that movie seemed to want to be the Alex Winter movie and his giant construct spirit friends, and then they crammed the Ninja Turtles into it. And also about a season worth of plot into 2 hours.
It unfortunately felt a lot like that. Like you said, the Ninja Turtles were kind of an also-ran in the movie. So
especially Donatello. He is virtually invisible in that movie.
Well, the movie focuses a lot on Leonardo and Raphael reconciling their differences, and so there's not really a place for Michelangelo and Donnie in that.
Which, that should be a red flag if you're designing a Ninja Turtle movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good storyline to focus on, but yeah, there's 4 of them and they're kind of a team. You really need to draw all of them into the storyline.
Yeah, I really wish that was a season of a TV show.
Yeah.
There was so much there, so much hinted at. Like they were fighting 13 monsters, and we meet 2 of them, and then the rest are captured in montage.
Yeah, like off screen by the Foot Clan, for crying out loud.
Thank you. So what about? I've just lost that question there, man.
All right. We've spent a lot of time on Ninja Turtles, which I'm happy. Oh,
yes. But we could also talk about gaming. Ooh, Retro Mutagen Ooze. I have a chicken mug. It is in no way mutated.
Oh, actually, you know what? I think Ninja Turtles would be best played with Starfinder for a couple of reasons. One is that they're kind of all Gestalt characters in that they are all ninjas, but they're really more defined by leads, does machines, party animal. And so it really feels like ninja is their theme, but their class is the other thing.
Yeah,
and Starfinder is also... go ahead.
I was going to say, I've got a pastiche of the Ninja Turtles coming up in the Super Team Handbook coming out for Mutants and Masterminds.
Ooh, what is a pastiche?
Pastiche, it's inspired by and takes some cues from, but they're not Ninja Turtles.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was like a game term or a design term.
More of a design term.
Mm-hmm. So how did you adapt the concept of Ninja Turtles into a superhero game?
Well, I looked at, like you said, all of them have certain things that make them ninjas. They've got like a stealth-focused advantage or 2, and high ranks in stealth, and they all focus in ancient melee weapons. And then, that eats up. Mutants and Masterminds uses a point-based system, and that eats up, maybe 10%, 15% of their points, and then the rest of that goes into defining like the other things they can do in combat and out of combat. Like our leader character has advantages that, she's very good in close combat, but she's also very good at coming up with plans on the fly to help her sisters like coordinate better and work together as a team. And our like goofy pop culture icon, her big thing is Just to split out the role, she is also the computer hacker because she is big on video games, and the only way to get video games when you live in a sewer is piracy. So, but she's also got a lot of advantages that make her like endearing to people around her, and she's good at like helping people like get back on their feet when they feel like defeated and miserable. And she's got skills that help her sort of like make others happy or get information out of people. She's very much the social butterfly in the group. So, I mean, just like in an adventuring party where you've got, you know, your fighter handles the upfront beating people with a stick and your rogue handles the traps. You think about the kinds of things you're going to encounter in a modern urban game, and then you break those into roles and try and figure out like what skills and powers emphasize those.
So are these NPCs in an adventure, or is this a series of building blocks for making this type of character?
A series of building blocks. It's basically a micro campaign guide. The idea is like, here's how you use the system to build this kind of superhero team, this genre of game. So the default Mutants and Masterminds book assumes you're going to basically play, you know, the X-Men, the Justice League, the Avengers. That sort of like, we are generic superheroes on a mission to stop generic evil. And the Super Team Handbook sort of focuses a little more like, this is how you do a Heroes on the Run campaign. This is how you do, you know, a Suicide Squad style game. This is how you do like a Leverage style game where we are all just ordinary people screwing with people way more powerful than us.
I really want to make my villains for the Mutants and Mastermind campaign I talked about last episode. I want to make them generic evil. Their goal is to take all flavor from the universe.
So it's like
to take that literally or metaphorically.
I want to call them Guy. They're like a reverse Guy Fieri. Like they take everything from Flavortown.
Exactly.
Okay, so we are talking literal flavor. They want to make all food bland.
They will take all the spice. The spice won't flow.
Wouldn't it be easier to just fry everyone's taste buds?
Season 2 plot.
But now they're going straight into Joe Villain. They're going to make a chain of fast food restaurants, and they're just going to be a whole bunch of the evil twin characters dressed up as Ronald McDonald, just turning out food just so hot it destroys your tongue.
I guess that's a more direct use of evil fast food than putting an actual rocket on the top of your restaurant and pretending it's just your mascot.
Again with the G.I. Joe plots.
Thank you. Yes. Red
We
Rockets.
haven't once talked about Jem this entire episode.
Let's talk about Jem.
All right, Jem, I think, is a great example of how you make your villains compelling characters without making them, like, there's something to overcome every episode, not something to kill. So they're a great way to depict antagonists rather than villains. Like, the Misfits absolutely try to straight up murder Jem at least once an episode.
Wow, once an episode, that often.
Once an episode? Oh yeah, there's dynamite, and I mean, half the time they're using weird mad science they get from Tech Rat, and in one case they try to just basically crush her with a bulldozer, drown her in one episode. Yeah, I think they tried to drown Jem like 4 times.
It's amazing how casual the 80s were about just straight up murder in kid shows.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like, the Holograms and the Misfits both worked for the exact same record label, and they had to perform together half the time, or they were in direct competition in, like, Battle of the Band scenarios, or, like, Battle of the Network Stars style, like, sporting competitions, things like that, where, like, you can't just murder her back. You've got to just try and win despite the fact that the other team is cheating, or, you know, cheat more nobly than they do.
I mean, there have been over the years rival podcast of ours. None of them have tried to shank me at Gen Con.
Oh, I'm sorry,
They
Param.
tried to drown me that time, Param.
Do you want me to try and shank you at Gen Con this?
Thank you.
Just sometimes it feels good to be thought of.
Aw. You know what? I'm gonna send you a package.
Woohoo!
Open it
Justin
away
Sluter-
from everybody else.
Justin Sluter's brought up Mask in chat, and I do want to talk about it. But are we? Are we done with Gem? Is there anything else you want to bring up?
Sure. Although I will warn you, I have seen exactly one episode of Mask.
Okay.
Yeah, Mask is going to be a weakness for me too. You're going to have to carry this one.
Go, Ryan. We'll make snarky comments.
Okay. Well, so first of all, Mask had a great opening to every episode. Like Act One would always end with, "Okay, we figured what the plot is," and now Matt Tracker calls the specific specialist to that assignment. And I think even on like a Private Sanctuary a long time ago, I even said like, "This is a great way to have multiple PCs in your campaign, where it's a great excuse to swap in only a couple of people per mission."
Oh, absolutely.
The one thing that I did especially like about that is every episode they would show the person doing their day job or whatever, get the call, and then just leave. And like one of the guys was a principal at a school, and he's just leaving. One of them was a scientist who would always just abandon his experiments.
Yeah, wasn't one of them a doctor?
No, I think he was a scientist.
Okay.
Well, scientists in cartoons can do anything science related at all. So he was a doctor when they needed a doctor.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Ryan, since you are the designated Mask expert. What Game Master role did T-Bob serve?
Comic relief. No, like
I'm not seeing it because he wasn't funny.
I mean, he was probably intended to be funny. There's plenty of not funny game masters out there. I guess the other thing T-Bob could have been was the game master never wanted the players to lose, and so it's like, oh, I've put you in the scenario, and it ends up none of you handle. Luckily, T-Bop was designed with just such a feature.
That's actually a really good fallback for GMs. That's kind of ingenious.
But
Just
Having
the tag along that's got a bag of holding, and it's like, we need remove paralysis? I'm pretty sure. And then he just pulls out the perfect potion for the situation.
maybe not
Like,
something
no one's having
that
fun.
specific.
I've got
yeah.
fun in my bag.
Well, I've got a get out of death free card. Sure.
I mean, I wouldn't go that far, but I do think that if it's just like, this is an inconvenient obstacle that we've just kind of been
The challenge-
roadblocked by, let's find some dynamite for this roadblock.
Yeah, the challenge has stopped being fun, so we're gonna call on our, 3 times per episode GM get out of stuck free card.
I think that is a really cool alternative to like an action point system. Just having
Yeah,
your buddy, Johnny MacGuffin.
your Slimer, if you will.
But it should be like a
Everybody
bag.
gets knocked out, Slimer saves the day.
It should be a bag, and you put in 3 green marbles and 2 red marbles, and it solves the problem on the green marble and just makes it more complicated on the red marble.
Oh,
So
I
at the
like
table,
that.
wow, this is getting really cool.
Param's the real game designer here. We're just along for the show.
This is the only one who hasn't published something in game design.
But that's binary. Like you can get very elaborate with the different colors of marbles, and you can have them color coordinated to the characters. So it's like, all right, so you found the solution this time. Or there could be the good, the bad, and the good but options.
Oh, I like that a lot.
Yeah,
Because that's a really common trope, especially in animated series. Like somebody's got a power they never use and never talk about again after.
that's
you could just-
basically Captain Planet's power.
Yeah. That's just about every. Yeah, that's just about every animated series I can think in the 80s and 90s.
It was
Why didn't you just form Voltron from the beginning? Why did you wait till the end?
because we hadn't built up our Voltron meter yet.
I think the new show does a good job of implying there's some kind of Voltron meter, but the old show be like, no, we're just waiting for the Voltron moment of the episode.
Yeah. The oh goodness. Well, when you have it just immediately form Voltron, you get Power Rangers.
But the Power Rangers are also required to wait until their enemy escalated.
This is true. You have to wait for the Rita Repulsa staff to come down before you're allowed to bring the giant robot into the field.
Don't challenge me on my Power Rangers knowledge, son.
The new fighting game, that's not how it works at all. Like you can just be fighting and then like you summon your Zord just steps on the other guy.
Yeah. I don't remember the fatalities in the TV show, but it has been 20 years. So.
But
We
you
are
did
about to
mention
move on.
this that.
Before we-
Okay, I can't hear
So before we
Ryan.
move on from Mask, I just want to point out the theme song did say they were working overtime fighting crime, but as I already expressed,
it's like
they
a
were
second
cutting
job.
work to fight crime. They were not working overtime. Go on.
One of the most common things about especially 80s cartoons, and less so with modern cartoons, but if you're a fan of basing your campaign on 80s cartoons, there is the concept that at the end of this adventure we reset to status quo, and any major deviation from the status quo was a to be continued or season finale type situation. Which works for organized play. If you do a lot of organized play, it's a good way to see that. Like the Pathfinder Society, a lot of that is, and Starfinder Society especially, is just straight up, here's this weird sci-fi cartoon episode we're going to go through, and it's completely self-contained, and maybe it'll get a part 2 where the cameo next season ties back to this season's, and oh, there's the fuzzy little things we saved in this adventure in episode 26 last year.
Wait, so Starfinder Society is just Silverhawks?
Absolutely, it's just Silverhawks. It's Silverhawks mixed with
You
the
just
Star
made-
Trek the animated series, not any of the shows. The animated series.
Yeah, you just made Starfinder Society 300% more awesome.
What's also cool about that is that it can feel like you are just resetting it, so you know the action figures look like they do when you get them off the store shelves. But then every now and then the episodes would make a significant change, and it would feel like a significant change. Like the high school principal on Mask, at one point his vehicle melts, and at the end of the episode they give him a new vehicle, and he just
Aw.
kind of has a tear in his eye as he's looking it over, and it's like, this was a moment. And from then on, that was his new vehicle.
Huh.
I mean, you gotta sell new toys, and the GM goes to conventions and buys new figures.
Yep, I was among the children traumatized in the 80s by the Transformers
Oh.
movie, killing off half of the characters. I don't even remember watching the show as a kid, but I remember going to see the movie and like Megatron just straight up killing like a dozen guys.
It's so violent and just so brutal too. They don't just die; they die painfully, and you see the light fade from their eyes.
Yeah.
Not just like smoke comes out of their eyes, and then Ironhide's like crawling to do one last heroic thing, and Megatron's like, such pathetic heroics, and kills him. And it's like, well, that drove home a point.
But
It always
yeah,
bugged me
I think
that then like Prime beats up a whole bunch of Decepticons, and they all end up surviving. It's like, no, like they get transformed and stuff into new Decepticon personas, but not a single Decepticon died until Starscream, whereas all the Autobots got wiped out.
yeah, but Jesus, what a way to go for poor Starscream.
Yeah, no, that was good. As
I mean, he
Coronation
went
gets
out at-
disintegrated.
Went out in his prime? So like
Right.
I see what I
Transformers.
I'm putting Crystal's villain point over here.
yeah, no.
You just earned a red marble, Crystal.
That's what I do to my players. They pun at the table. They get a villain point reserved for them.
Even when it's not intentional?
Those are the best kinds.
We've
I
got
think
about half an hour left before you got to leave us, right, Crystal?
Yes. I ironically have to go get to my Starfinder game.
How is that ironic?
What are you playing?
But yeah, I think. Oh, I'm playing a Stellafaris soldier. So a little cuttlefish with hydrokinesis, and she basically pilots heavy armor like it's a Jaeger.
I
Nice.
love it. Cosmic Crit
So,
very pointedly asked, have I gotten here before they talked about gargoyles?
No.
Should we
So-
talk about gargoyles?
gargoyles.
Yeah, Marina Sirtis as Demona made me gay.
All right. I can see
Yeah, Gargoyles was one of the earliest shows that had a continuing building storyline over a whole season that I can remember as a kid. I was Robotech was a few years too early for me back then. So
So gargoyles was something that I was only aware of and then tried to get into as an adult with that, knowing that reputation. And it feels like the first couple of episodes more standalone. And so I've got the DVD of the full series upstairs, and I never got past the first few episodes. So sell me on gargoyles.
all right, Gargoyles is basically they're Klingons, they can fly. They don't have Scottish accents even though they're from Scotland, which probably the most egregious crime in the entire series, and they fight Commander William Riker and Counselor Troy.
It's
The whole
David
animated
Keith's
series was
Goliath,
basically a
right?
dumping ground for next generation actors.
David Keith is Goliath?
Yes, David Keith is Goliath. And, the idea is they are, stuck outside their own time. They're originally from Dark Ages, medieval Scotland, and they've been thrust into modern day New York City and the machinations of a billionaire who's using them as part of a very convoluted plot to, one, dominate the tech industry, and two, become immortal.
It shows a lot of what you would want from your campaign. You've got a lot of history and world building that you can pull back on for episodes. You've got a whole lot of really flavorful villain characters. You get the nice betrayal arcs in there.
Much.
So many good betrayal arcs.
This is the show that gave us the term the Xanatos Gambit, where you set up what seems like the obvious villain for the episode, but the players fighting that villain is ultimately what gives your mastermind their victory for the episode. There's the one that really jumps out at me is there's an episode where they have to stop a cyborg gargoyle, which is a whole other thing that's going on. And so they fight the gargoyle, they win in the end, they save the day, and it seems like they've beaten the Mastermind's plot this episode, but the Mastermind's plot was already won in Act 1 because the gargoyle cyborg used a taser and missed and hit a computer mainframe from a rival corporation and downloaded all of their proprietary information. Like, this whole fight was just a red herring so that one guy could copy the files from his competitor.
And it never came off, it was never frustrating as the viewer?
No, it was actually really cool as the viewer to see again and again, like he's never quite, like, he would always love it if his other scheme won. Like, if he beat the gargoyles, like, unequivocally, which he does a couple of times. But every time he's like, well, I've got this really nice consolation prize that's going to make me even richer and build towards my ultimate goals, so, you win a few, you lose a few.
Xanatos is a perfect campaign main villain because the gargoyles can't just straight up murder him. They just can't do that. That he's influential and protected in a way that they have to keep interacting with him and knowing the character, but when the straight up fights happen, they're major events.
I would also say Demona is a great example of how you make a villain that you just feel, because she's evil because she has survived so much. She hates humanity because all of her reasoning for why she does evil things, you're like, oh yeah, I see exactly how you got there. You have been treated horribly by life. I cannot find fault in your reasoning.
Yeah,
Like,
a lot of marginalized people will find sympathy in her.
yeah. Yeah. There's
Now, sympathetic villains often do become, like, anti-heroes or heroes towards the end. Is that her arc, or does she manage to remain villainous?
she stays a villain. She gets-
Xanatos becomes an anti-hero. She's the scariest thing to ever show up on that show.
Yeah, she escalates every single season. And every season you understand exactly why, and you see her reasoning, and by the end of the show she's like, I'm gonna commit genocide.
Okay.
Yeah. And you're sitting there as the viewer like, yeah, you know what? Go. You go.
In your shoes. All right,
Yeah.
baby.
No, she doesn't wear shoes.
Yeah. Well, she does when she's human, but that's a second season reveal.
I just want to go through chat. We haven't been interacting with chat too much. Sorry, guys.
Sorry,
but
chat.
I do want to make sure that anything that they specifically want us to call out. Oh wow, Bastille says Ray Fillet is cool. Did I bring up Ray? No, I didn't. Man, no, he was one of my favorite characters in Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, I loved him in the old Mutanimals comics. He was only in one episode of the '87 series.
And it was a terrible episode. Maybe it was an
Yeah.
okay episode, but it was a terrible depiction of Ray.
Yeah, Was he in the 2012 series? I'm trying to remember now. I don't remember him.
Yeah,
He's
I'm
great
not
in the
sure.
comics.
Yeah, he is great in the comic. That's why I liked him, and also why I think of him as Man Ray and Ray Fillet, which was
Yeah.
the name of on the
Sally-
toy.
Yeah, Sally Pride is a lot of fun too in the new Mutanimals.
Who's Sally Pride? I'm guessing the lion.
She's in the
Yes?
new IDW series. She's a lioness pilot / driver.
All right, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, she and Ray are old friends and basically join the team together.
You know what? I think I have a whole bunch of I think I got a humble bundle for the IDW Ninja Turtles, and I downloaded them, which I really should get around to because
Highly
what
recommend.
I have read from IDW it's fun. It's
Yeah.
it's what I want a Ninja Turtles comic to be.
Yeah, I would say the first collection is a little rough because they take a very different bend on the origin story, which isn't it's like I said, a pretty big departure from the tradition, so it's a little weird, but it smooths out very quickly.
All right, so I found a couple of cartoons we haven't talked about yet.
Mighty Ducks. Say Mighty Ducks.
Squeeve wants to talk about Gargamel.
Oh,
Gargamel's motivation and plots. And I do want to say that at one point, I did shrink my PCs and have them team up with the Smurfs, unbeknownst to them. 'Cause at the time, so my evil villains were called the Six-Fingered Gauntlet, and their headquarters was a giant beetle. They didn't know the beetle actually could shrink down to beetle size, so they got on the beetle at one point. It shrank. They got off. And I was just describing the like bizarre tall green trees, and they didn't realize they were just blades of grass. And so they met a society where every character identifies themselves by their job in that society. And then eventually they have to go to this castle and they have to fight. And they actually killed the cat that was guarding the cauldron that they needed to.
poor
Yeah, I
Azrael.
know. They killed Azrael. That was a really fun adventure.
yeah. I think
That's
there's
all I have to
actually-
say. Like Smurfs inspired a whole adventure, just a side quest from the main plot. And this was in 3.0 days, I think. And it's still something that my players will occasionally talk about.
Yeah, I think Smurfs is a great argument against using Gygaxian naturalism in your campaign.
Go on.
So, Gygaxian naturalism, as a quick review, is the idea that all of your monsters have an established place in the ecology of your world. The dungeon ecology works because leaves and stray animals wander in through the entrance, and moths and oozes eat those, and then the vermin eat those, and so on and so forth until you've got dragons snacking on ogres. And everything has produces children or lays eggs or whatever. They have a natural ecosystem that you would expect of any animal. Smurfs do not. Smurfs are created by magic by the previous generation of Smurfs, and then are raised to adulthood by that previous generation's survivor. That's why they're only male Smurfs until Gargamel creates a female Smurf. And it makes a lot of interesting plot hooks. For example, like the episode where they accidentally de-age several of the Smurfs down into Smurflings again, and that's just a plot point that stays with the show until it's canceled.
Wait.
And then the Smurflings try making their own Smurf, and that's where
That's
you
where
get
the Smurfs
Sassette.
came from?
Huh? Say what?
I remember the Smurflings. I didn't realize they were de-aged adult Smurfs.
Yep.
Oh wow, that's hard.
And then the Smurflings try making their own Smurf, like another Smurf kid to play with, and that's where you get Sassette, and she starts out evil just like Smurfette did. And that's a whole, basically an adventure built around introducing a new PC. And
There were a lot of cartoons that in the 80s I may have thought of as being like targeted towards girls or targeted towards kids, and it's like Smurfs, and there was a Raggedy Ann and Andy cartoon.
Oh, that was creepy, though.
And that's what I was going to say. It feels like they were actually just straight up fantasy adventure cartoons that often, instead of having violence and stuff, they would have weird psychological threats.
Yeah.
Like I remember there's My Little Pony where they're stealing their shadows, and it was like, what does that mean? What are the ramifications of having your shadow stolen?
Oh,
And
man.
a lot of the villains on those shows are much more creative than the action heroes you remember from the shows that I will usually champion on.
Oh yeah, there was a Smurfs plot where there was some kind of plague that turned them purple and aggressive. It was basically a zombie apocalypse plague, and it was spread by biting.
Yeah,
And it gave
based
me
on the very
nightmares
first
as a kid.
comic too, except that in that comic they're black. They are jet black, and you can see why they changed them to purple.
Yeah. But but yeah, I've done campaigns where Gygaxian naturalism just doesn't exist. Like anything that's a monster behaves that way because it is spawned by, magic or, some other unnatural force, so it doesn't have a place it's supposed to exist in the world.
Yeah, that's also my prefer. Like, I like occasionally exploring sociology and like more nuanced of alignment and why certain creatures may fall into a certain category. But most of the time, I just want to throw a creepy monster that unsettles my players at them until they beat it to death. And I don't want there to be any ethical questions about whether they should be doing that most of the time.
Yeah, the way Pathfinder handles Gugs, where you get new Gugs by one Gug eating the corpse of another Gug and then vomiting up two Gugs. Like, I love that shit. Poop.
So close. So close.
Oh,
We almost made it, Crystal.
almost made it! Someday I will be on this and not swear.
Lord Sathian briefly brings up Samurai Pizza Cats. Which
Oh,
is
that's a great
Oh!
which is a show that often gets that reaction. Why?
That would be
What-
such an amazing beer and pretzels RPG experience.
show. Yeah,
What
a
is
lot.
the appeal of Samurai Pizza Cats?
Have you never seen it?
I
Okay.
remember seeing it once at a sleepover, 3 a.m.
It was
So- Yeah, it was a kids anime that got brought over by Fox in the early 90s. But when they translated it, they didn't translate it directly. They translated it sarcastically. Like, the translation team, as near as I can tell, threw out the original scripts or just didn't read Japanese. And basically did whatever sarcastic voiceovers they wanted over top of it that still made a mostly functional, coherent episode. It's kind of like MST3K for kids. Like all of the characters are constantly commenting about the fact that they're in a cartoon show, and there's a bunch of jokes about like, we can't summon our big robot yet because then the episode would only be 20 minutes long, or or we have to use our ultimate power now because otherwise we're going to run over. But yeah, it's a superhero Sentai sort of show where there's robot animals in a medieval, like Edo-style Japanese city, and the Big Cheese is like a robot rat who runs the town, and he's got a bunch of evil crows that work for him, and they're all trying to conquer the kingdom without like giving up the fact that they are necessarily the villains of the show. So they use like a bunch of intermediaries and giant monsters and things like that.
Darren Caldemeyer wants to know about Jason the Wheeled Warriors.
Oh, that's a good one.
This
Sorry.
is one I don't have experience with.
Okay, Jason the Wheeled Warriors is basically King Arthur meets Star Trek or Star Wars.
Okay.
So it is a series about it's a sci-fi series. It would be perfect for to model a Starfinder campaign off of. This scientist accidentally creates like hyper powerful, super intelligent plants that can only leave this controlled environment they have by transforming into monster trucks. And so the scientist who created these plants accidentally sends the technology to make similar monster trucks to his son, who teams up with a wizard, a tiny robot knight, and Han Solo, and they each build their own, like, paladin robot trucks to fight the evil robot trucks. And it's got an ongoing kind of developing narrative, went for a whole season with a very well-developed plot, and yeah, pretty compelling characters, even for a very silly premise.
Really?
Yes. It also had really cool toys, as I recall. I think my brother had a few, where like you could take parts off of one truck and put them onto the other.
Oh, cool.
And-
I have fantasy designed several, action figure lines in my day, and one of them was what would be the perfect Dreadnoks, and that would it would be like a big monster truck, and then several you could always swap in different parts and just customize it because they were basically just scrappers.
But I think that would be a great model for a Starfinder campaign. You just basically use the same model you have for the starship construction, but break it down onto an individual level where everybody's got their own starship, and then you can have a bunch of accessories that you can swap in and out depending on the adventure.
Sounds great.
Almost like the Lego Movie treats Master Builder. Like, are you saying in the middle of an encounter, it's like, all right, this isn't working, let's reconstruct in the middle of it?
They don't do it in the middle of encounters in the show, I think, but there's no reason you can't in your own campaign if that's what excites you. Yeah. I want to say I prepared for this specific episode by rewatching Alienators, the animated series they made for the Ivan Reitman Evolution movie.
Oh
Okay.
my God! I now
was the
know
name
what
of the
you're
series?
talking about.
It wants to be the real Ghostbusters so bad.
Yes, it does.
They even have a Slimer. But it's kind of a good, I think it was a good lesson in like, I want to run the real Ghostbusters, but for Starfinder or Mutants and Masterminds, whatever. How do I do it? What are the essential elements that make the real Ghostbusters such a fun series that I can emulate in my home game? And
I'd like to know, because my fond memories of Ghostbusters are mostly from the cartoon. Like, I appreciate the movie for what it is, but like anytime I think back on Ghostbusters fondly, it's the cartoon visuals, it's the cartoon characterization of those characters.
yeah, I think we can all agree that the cartoon was better than the movies.
It's a great Monster of the Week premise.
Yeah. And I think, again, I think the lessons that Alienators took from the real Ghostbusters were, we need a toyetic vehicle, and everybody needs a distinct personality so that they have conflicts and weird pairings, and we need a cute, ugly sidekick. And those were the wrong elements to take from the real Ghostbusters. I think the core elements, I think Extreme Ghostbusters got the core elements of Ghostbusters pretty much right, where, I mean, your big elements are you set up a very iconic threat each episode, each adventure, what have you, and, you have your means of conveyance to and from, you have your Ecto-1, you have your way to get around, you have characters that are well developed, but you also spend some time with those characters, developing their conflicts, their personalities, letting the players have fun with each other before you throw them into danger.
Yeah.
And then, ideally, you find some way to make those early interactions they had come up again later in the episode.
Yeah, I think
It
that's
also does
something.
a great job of establishing the monsters. Like, some of them are just creepy looking, and so they will just get a scene of them being creepy looking. Some of them have deeper and more involved powers, and so that's usually the one that the whole plot is about. And a GM can definitely look at that show and be like, don't just throw a couple of monsters in a room. Like, take the second, pause the action and say, so this is what this thing looks like. These are the ideas that come to your mind just looking at this stuff.
Yeah, and I think a good way to handle that is let your players handle the NPCs that are supposed to get beaten. So hand them the security guard, or like the mail delivery driver, or the whatever gets menaced that episode, and have them run the encounter with this monster that clearly outmatches them. So that way the players know what the danger is, even if their characters don't. And then when their characters confront it, it feels more personal.
That's a neat trick.
It also kind of reminds me of something. You mentioned Scott McCloud.
Oh, wait, your
Whoops.
audio cut out there. I missed you.
Was that me or was that you?
That
I
was
think that was my headphones.
no, it was Ryan.
Ryan!
I'm sorry. How about now?
You're
Yes,
fine.
you're good.
Okay, so you mentioned Scott McCloud earlier and understanding his book. That's the title of the book. One of the great takeaways from that book is like when you picture yourself, this is what you look like, and it's like here you are with all your wrinkles and everything. When you picture somebody else, here's what they look like, and it's just, circle with 2 eyes and mouth. And the more familiar you are with someone, the more details come to mind. And that's also a great way of portraying just NPCs and mooks versus the main villain. Just like gloss over a lot of the details and just go with like the silhouette of this creature that's coming at you. But when it's a creature of importance, go into the wrinkles, go into the warts, make it feel familiar.
Yeah, make it. It helps if you can pull on elements that your characters are already familiar with. That's why so many animated series characters, especially like side characters, are built off of like classic comedians or V characters or like things that are just a part of our cultural language. Like, you may not have any idea who W.C. Fields is, but the iconic, like, surly, slightly drunk con man who talks kind of like this. Move along, son, you bother me. That kind of thing. Like, everybody knows what that character is. Those are the easy way to fill in, the wrinkles and the pimples.
I'd like to go back to something you talked about one of the things that made Ghostbusters great, and made a lot of these cartoons great, is that they would often open with a social scene with the characters, like you said, that would sometimes quite often tie into the episode. I was thinking about ways to emulate that and to encourage a player group to have social encounters with each other, especially bait and hook. And I was thinking maybe do something where at the beginning of the session, the GM, either from a random stack or from some custom tailored one based on the adventure or what he knows the player characters are doing or from their backstories, has just little bitty minor goals that he slips to each character. It's like, get another character to tell you about their parents, or get another have another character help you with this problem, or obtain this sort of item that's hard to get sometime during the session. And if you complete the little goal, you get a hero point, but you're not allowed to tell the other players what the goal is.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I think it makes for a really strong, personal motivations for characters. And I love systems that give out, bennies, conviction, hero points, whatever you call them, that reward players for really getting into their character's headspace.
So, because I was going to go a very different direction with that same premise, Param, and that is that usually those scenes have a specific thing that separates them. So it's not just, here's the 4 characters sitting in a room. It's Michelangelo has a kitten. And now react to that. Give them something to react to. You're playing poker. Yeah. You are looking up at the sky and you're arguing what the clouds look like.
Yeah, Eduardo hasn't slept in 3 days. Why haven't you slept in 3 days? And what are you doing now about it? Character hooks like that. I mean, sometimes you'll give it the motivation to a character secretly, especially if it's like, a character trait that they haven't shared with the rest of the group, or involves family that they haven't, introduced to everybody else. But
so there's a couple of shows that have been mentioned in chat that we're not going to be able to get to, but I feel like we would be false advertising if we don't talk about Dark Water for
All right, so the Pirates of Dark Water is what happens when somebody wants their D&D campaign to have a cartoon. This isn't just lightly based off of, like, you've got the main character who is obvious fighter swashbuckler Ren. You've got his animal quirky sidekick Niddler, which is just required for every cartoon to have. But then you got the girl who is a wizard. You've got like the strong type, that obviously the person that didn't want to have too many social encounters.
I like that they made the animal sidekick also sort of the rogue, because Nibbler is like your sarcastic, thieving. Like, he's got his own personality. He's not just Slimer tagging along and chittering as he goes. Like, he comes along with the party, he goes on adventures, he convinced them to help free his people from slavery. Pirates of the Dark Water is the best pilot for a really mediocre TV series.
Yeah.
Because after the first 5 episodes that everyone remembers, the quality goes straight downhill.
Yeah. And it's one of those series where it's like, we've got these 13 MacGuffins that we need to solve, and they find 5 of them. And then the series gets canceled.
Yeah. I think it was just a case of it being way too expensive to produce.
Them and those ghosts of Scooby-Doo. I'll never find out what happened to the rest of them.
They did a movie for The Last Ghost! Sorry, just in the last year, maybe 2 years, they did the 13th Ghost of Scooby-Doo.
Oh, I have to go check that out.
Yes! So all of those dangling plot threads are tied up. Sadly, Vincent Price could not reprise his role because he does not respond to summoning circles.
You'd think if
What was
anybody
Vincent Price's
would.
role in-
Sorry, what?
What was Vincent Price's role on that show?
He was like the mission giver. He was their Charlie for that season.
He was the creepy wizard necromancer dude. He played Vincent Price.
Yeah, he was Vincent Van Ghoul, who had contained the original 13 ghosts, and who, like, because they let them out, he's the one forcing Scooby and Shaggy and Daphne to chase them all down.
Okay, this is one of the Scooby-Doo series that actually has supernatural elements. Mm-hmm. I prefer
It's
my
the
Scooby-Doo
only
when
good-
it's always
well-
just millionaires.
I was gonna say, the other good Scooby-Doo series that actually has supernatural element didn't introduce the supernatural elements until late 2. But if you haven't watched Scooby-Doo Mysteries Incorporated, it is hands down the best Scooby-Doo ever put to film.
Yeah, that's
It
the
is
one where they
from a few years
advertised
ago, right?
ditching the ascot as part of the.
No, the ascot is there the whole time. They make a big point of Fred loving his ascots. Like, he talks neck sizes with another guy with ascots in one episode. The whole series is so self-aware of all the Scooby-Doo genre tropes and all of the history of the series. They talk about every single previous iteration of Scooby-Doo. Don Knotts shows up in the background of every episode. They have a wax dummy of Flim Flam in the horror museum. It is just genius. Oh, it is such a well-developed show.
So this is not the note I expected to end on, but we are running out of time for you, Crystal, and I do want to make sure that tell people where they can find you and about what you're working on lately for Mutants and Masterminds.
Well, it's easiest to find me on Twitter. I'm at Amazon Chic, CHIQUE. You will find me there being sarcastic and tweeting about queer issues most of the time and game design about 30% of the time. And right now we are working on wrapping up the Super Team Handbook that I talked about earlier. We're just waiting on a few pieces of art before we can send that to the printer. I've got 2 other projects in the pipeline for Mutants and Masterminds and a couple of adventure ideas that are sort of not in limbo. They're done. They're processed. We're figuring out what to do with them and a release schedule and all of that branding stuff. So,
Speaking of branding, I feel like Mutants and Masterminds, there's just a positive buzz about it lately. And
hope so.
I have to assume that you deserve a lot of the credit for that.
I mean, a lot of the attention for that goes to Steve. The system is his baby originally. My biggest contribution recently was the Basic Heroes Handbook, which is our 3rd edition of the game is very rules heavy. It's very dense text, and if you grew up through 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3rd edition makes perfect sense. If you did not, 3rd edition is a little bit of a barrier to entry. So the Basic Heroes Handbook was our attempt to use more like plain language and explain things in a more approachable way.
It is working. My group has been using that book to learn the rules and learn to play the game for my campaign, and it's very well put together and easy to understand. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I'm really happy about that. That was my big goal. I love this system, and I'm really happy I could make it more accessible.
Yeah, I got the big book out, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. Here, everybody, here's one of these.
And I just released the World of Lazarus campaign setting based on the Greg Rucka's Lazarus comic books, which is like a dystopian near-future economic thriller with sci-fi elements. It's hard to explain.
Every time you bring it up, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to check that. Pick it up. And I still haven't, and I'm sorry. I sincerely am interested in this. Every time you bring it up, it's just
I'm gonna force you to do a Let's Play with me of that game.
All right.
Okay.
That'll
Can-
force you to read the comics.
Curse you, Crystal. Forcing you to play
Can I-
more
can I
awesome
get in on
role-playing
that?
games.
I mean, I'm going to have to record it anyway.
Excellent. I had a lot of fun with this, Crystal. Thank you, and I learned about you because you've been on the show for like often over the years, and you're my GM now, and yet I'm finding out so many things about you every time we talk.
I have led a very eclectic life.
Fascinating. All right, enjoy your game tonight.
Yeah, thank you again for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
We'll have you on again sometime in the near future, I'm sure.
Yeah, next time you want to talk about cartoons.
Yeah, seriously, we can continue this conversation.
We'll just start doing a monthly Let's Play series that is a 4-hour block based on a different animated series each time.
This sounds glorious.
Did I just set myself up for a whole bunch more?
Well, at least there's a lot of witnesses that can say you're on the hook.
Oh, no. No, there can't be more than like 3 listeners.
Well, we've had a pretty busy episode.
So 4 listeners then.
I like Lord Sathian's suggestion that the first show we do is the D&D cartoon. Like, what a stretch.
Okay, but Eric is the only sensible person in that whole cartoon.
That was my favorite thing going back to that show. Are we keeping you from your game? Because
We
I feel like this
are,
conversation will never
unfortunately.
actually...
We'll have to do a part 2 of Animated Anarchy or whatever we want to call it.
Ooh, animated anarchy.
Okay, I'm registering the
I'll make a
domain
list of
name
all the
after
ones we talked
this.
about this episode. New shows
right.
next time, because there will definitely be a next time.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much for having me on board. It was great to talk to you guys.
Thank you, Crystal. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Have a
good
great
day.
night.
We'll be... You do it, Brian. Sorry.
All right.
Sure. We'll be right back to talk about the latest news right after this.
All right. Well, take care. I will see you.
Bye.
Find the news. Find the news. Find the news. Find the news.
And we're back, and I have to fix my camera. There we go.
Talk or you want it? Okay. In the news segment, we talk about all the latest happenings for the Pathfinder playing game from Paizo from third-party publishers. Basically, if it's an interesting point of note for you, the fans, we try and bring it to your attention. We've got 2, I would say, pretty big announcements that came out today.
Yeah.
We went from not expecting to have a news segment to having a very important news segment in this episode.
And we were already hyped about this episode without anything else to talk about.
Yeah, well, I mean, that Crystal conversation, I don't know if I had exact expectations for how it was going to go, but we got it.
Okay, we need to pause
Why?
because we got to fix your mic real quick.
Go on.
Okay, it has nothing to do with your microphone. But I figured out the cause of the Discord. Suddenly we stop hearing you even though you're talking thing.
Yep.
And I fixed it with Alex. So we're going to fix it with you live on Twitch.
Woo! What are we doing?
All right, gang, I'm going to go to the title screen for a second because while I walk around through this, just hang with us for a second. So go to Discord settings.
Yep.
And
User
then go
settings?
Down the lower right, the Discord set. Yeah,
Here.
user settings. Yeah. And go to voice and video.
Yep.
All right, so where it says if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see input sensitivity. Where it
Yep.
says automatically determine input sensitivity, turn that off.
Done.
And then drag that bar far to the left, like minus 92 dB.
Done.
All right, that as long as we still have you, that should do it. We should now not have any more of you disappearing on us.
That's good.
This was almost making me abandon Discord, having to deal with that problem every week.
How'd you find the solution?
A lot of trial and error.
Oh, all
This is something I figured out on my own. Wasn't shown how to do it. All right, and we're good. Let me get us back to 2 Up. And we're back.
Do I restart the new segment?
Yeah.
Right from like the whole thing, the whole
Yeah.
script. Okay. In the news segment, we talk about the latest happenings for the Pathfinder role-playing game from Paizo, from third-party publishers, licensees. Basically, if it's an interesting point for you, the fans, we like to bring it to your attention. And we went from not thinking we were going to have a news segment to having two fairly significant bits of news that just broke earlier today.
Yeah, and not that we weren't super hyped to have this episode going into it, even without any news to talk about.
So the first of those items is Pathfinder Society 2nd Edition has previewed the benefits system.
Oh boy, have they.
It ends up that the things you get from participating in Pathfinder Society Adventures is going to change quite a bit from not only Pathfinder 1st Edition, but also from what was changed for Starfinder Society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, some of the changes from Starfinder Society are being moved over. So you've got the infamy system from Starfinder is making over to Pathfinder, which is like actual canonified, you did a bad thing. And in Starfinder, that's almost encouraged a little bit of infamy because it's a hard sci-fi setting. But if your character ever gets 3 infamy, which means a GM warned you in advance, that is part of the GM is supposed to warn you, that action might cause infamy. It is in the play guide, you're supposed to warn them. And if you go through with it anyway and you get 3, the society is like, you're too much, you're out.
So that's how it works in Starfinder Society. I don't think they address... oh, no, it is...
They totally did.
It's
yes.
the same thing. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Let's go through each of the 7 different things you can collect, the 7 different benefits, and then I do want to go through some of them a little more closely, and infamy is definitely one of them. Mm-hmm. So XP.
Yes.
Same concept. This is how you level, but the values have definitely changed.
Yep. They didn't... There was a big vote. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to list them all, and then we can analyze them. Reputation, which tracks influence a PC has in a faction. Achievement points, which is the currency that you use within your faction. Oh, no, sorry. This is the metagame currency. Mm-hmm. Downtime. This is a little more abstract of a reward, and we'll go into that when we talk about it. Fame represents a player's social capital, which can be spent, gold pieces. I don't know why it's still listed as GP, because they even specifically call out that it starts as silver pieces. But anyway, this is your character's wealth. Okay, so Param, you had thoughts on experience points?
Yeah, so before they did the XP, because Pathfinder 2nd Edition is going to have a static XP per level number, which is 1,000, and that's easier to track than the increasing scale XP, which is the reason they went to a simplified one for Society in the first place. We were wondering if we were just going to go with the default XP, because why not? It's not that hard to count to 1,000. In the end, they decided to go with 12 experience points, so that you will get, on average, 4 for completing what we currently know as a scenario every time you do it, or 1 for completing a quest, because they really want to do more of these quest thingies.
And one of the advantages of this 4 XP system, 4 XP per scenario, is that slow track then puts you down to 2 XP instead of a fraction of an XP. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, they didn't bump quests up to 2 and then fraction it down to 1. So the only time you can get a fraction of an XP is if you go slow track on a quest. Mm-hmm. But in general, this eliminates a lot of the fractions. It's still small, easy to calculate numbers. And it is the same system as in First Edition Pathfinder Society, where you reach the point, then you reset. You need the same number of XP to go up a level every time.
Right.
All right, infamy. So, Param, one of my points that I was going to say is that I hope that scenarios aren't written like it's, Mass Effect or Fable. Like, it's a game that assumes a morality system where being really immoral is not a bad thing, and so they play with the plots like that. Because... I don't want it to factor into the plot. I want it to really be like, this is something in desperate times, they could call for desperate situations. You can do something evil and, get away with it a couple of times. Or as like a way of just kind of educating players of like, you can't just go run amok in every scenario. You have to still behave civilized in this setting. Mm-hmm. Those were the 2 things I wanted it to be. So I'm surprised to hear you say that in Starfinder Society, they do actually sometimes set you up into situations where you do have to earn infamy.
No. I'm just saying that they did, like, sometimes infamy is thematically let me rephrase that. They wanted, because Starfinder is a hard sci-fi game, this is in a lot of the panels we talked to, that the occasional, well, bad guy action from a character on the, that happens a lot in sci-fi movies and shows. There's the one guy who makes the hard call or does the thing the others don't want to do. And because it's so much more thematic in sci-fi than traditional fantasy, they wanted it to not just be an instant ejection from society like it can be. Like if you do an evil act in Pathfinder Society, your GM can, at that point, rule your character done. One and done. And there's really not a lot of reprisal options a player has for that. But in Starfinder, the GM is supposed to, you get warned, hey, that's probably going to give you an infamy, and there's penalties for having infamy, and too many of them will get you booted. But it doesn't just, it isn't one and done. There's actually a rule system, a way to kind of rebuild your reputation and get out of it that's not cheap and gets harder every time you have to use it. So, like, you can get one infamy forgiven pretty easy, but it gets harder and harder the more you're trying to buy off. And in certain scenarios, it will mention, like, and if the players do this sort of thing, that's going to earn them an infamy. It isn't trying to encourage them to take the infamy option, but it does, like, outline, it's like, venting the nursery into space will earn them an infamy point.
Yep. Yeah, it will.
But yeah, it's not like the Mass Effect red trigger, blue trigger. How do you want to do it? It's just more of, it's got some rules behind it now. It set examples will be throughout the adventure of, like, if they decide to just shoot this dude and take his money instead of negotiate with him, that's infamy.
I do like in the blog post that we're referencing here, when they talk about infamy, it's fairly optimistic. It's like, it's not a pure punishment system, that it's flavorful, that people seem to like it, that they respond well to it, and that they actually now have, like, measurable proof that, for the most part, people aren't actually doing these evil acts. Yeah. Even though now they can technically get away with 2 of them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, you can get away with a lot more than 2 of them as long as you're willing to dump your prestige points on it.
Okay, you can get away with 2 for free, though.
Yeah.
Like, there is no recourse for having 2 infamy points.
There is. It lowers your item level that you can buy without having special permission, the more infamy points you get, because they just don't I'm not giving that guy a tactical nuclear warhead. Why? Because that orphanage last week, Johnson. That's why.
The space orphanage? It wasn't a space orphanage.
There's a lot more space in it now.
Yeah. All right, next up we've got Reputation and Fame. They've been linked together. And similar to how they worked in Starfinder Society, instead of like early Pathfinder Society where you were committed to a single faction and then just did the things that faction asked you to do, now you build up a reputation within the faction, and you can actually have reputation with multiple factions.
Yeah.
I like that system a lot better. I like that I'm loyal to Pathfinder Society. These people are trying to get my influence, and I'm willing to work with them, build up reputations there, but never at the expense of my goals for Pathfinder Society.
And in Starfinder Society, the factions of the Starfinder Society are a lot less antagonistic with each other. They are interested in working together. It's just like we all have different aspects of our society that we focus on, not so much of, darn those Andorans, we'll get them someday.
It says the higher your reputation within a faction, the more faction-oriented goodies you can access. And it says in practice, reputation is like XP for a faction, and then fame is the currency with which you can spend. So you can spend fame to get those goodies that you gain access to by having a higher reputation.
Yeah. Fame is pretty much exactly like it is in current society. I mean, you get lots of the list of good, cool things you can do with it and favors you can call in. Whereas the reputation is much more themed. It's much more, ooh, tech grenades. Ooh, really cool spaceship cloak that makes sense for this faction.
All right. I am reorganizing some of the things from the order that we originally talked about them, because I just want to talk about gold next, since it's pretty simple. When you pass scenarios, you get gold.
Yay!
Or silver. You
Yay!
get wealth.
Yep. Not much really to say there.
Downtime. Downtime takes the idea that after a scenario, you can do your day job. And adds a lot more variety to it and actually gives it like a measurement of time.
Yeah.
Because it was just a thing that tacked on at the end of a scenario before. And like I've played some multi-part scenarios where one scenario ends and when you start playing the next one, it basically assumes it's seconds later. So I don't know when you had time to go and do your day job as an accountant when you were on the run from these guys that just chased you out of the town at the end of part one of that scenario.
It's a bank error in your favor.
Oh, okay. What about cobbling?
I got nothing.
It's a shoe error in your favor?
No, we know it's the elves. The elves took care of it while you were asleep.
All right, no further questions. So now downtime is something that it's actually something that seems you can earn. It's assumed that you'll be able to get 3 days worth of downtime per XP, and that it can be spent on day jobs, but it can also be spent on stuff like crafting gear, retraining character options, and more.
Which is...
I wasn't crazy about how downtime was implemented in the playtest, but I still do love the concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so if downtime is going to be as big a part of the game as it seemed to be in the playtest, then this seems like a great implementation of it for Pathfinder Society.
Well, I didn't have much problem with downtime. Most of the friction that we kept running into with my groups was understanding encounter time.
No, the adventuring time. No, what was it called?
Oh, sorry.
There was encounter, downtime, and the exploration.
Yes.
Exploration mode.
Yes. Exploration
Downtime was...
Well, downtime's just Ultimate Campaign's downtime.
Yeah, downtime was fine.
Yeah.
And to come to think of it, I didn't directly experience downtime, so I take back anything bad I said about it. I am neutral towards downtime, but
I
theoretically.
really like downtime. I use it in my home campaign, and it's really fun to just characters are starting to care things about the small businesses they have in town and want them to do well, and then rivalries show up, and then it makes it really interesting when you tie in plot hooks. It's like, oh yeah, the silversmith across the street that keeps giving you a hard time and stealing your customers. Yeah, well, somebody kidnapped his daughter. He needs help, and you're the only adventurers around. It was a ruse.
Well, I
She
can't
ran
deal
off
with
with
that.
this.
This is my downtime. I just need to chill for a bit. Sorry. If it was adventuring time, then I could help you.
No, I mean,
What an inconvenient time for your daughter to be kidnapped. I feel bad.
but something we can take from this is crafting, which was explicitly banned in PF1, is going to be allowable in PF2.
And retraining character options, that's something that I believe we've both gone on record as saying we wish was more core to first edition.
Yeah, I hope it's as lax as it is with the playtest, where it's just, I understand you not wanting everybody to switch out most of their character constantly, but it shouldn't be super punishing to change options on your character. Nothing is worse than being forced to play something you don't enjoy.
The final thing you can earn, the final benefit you can earn, I should say, is the achievement points. And this is also probably the most interesting benefit. It's the player-based currency earned by playing and GMing society games. So think of things like campaign boons, things that were exclusive to being in the right place to play the game, which I understood the frustration, but I also definitely understood this was meant to support campaign play, and it was a marketing decision, so I had no personal objection to it. They are broadening up access to things like race boons, or I guess they will now be called ancestry boons. Although the blog still does call them race boons, but I guess they are more talking historically. So anyway, it is things like that, things of that nature, where it's additional boons that are maybe not necessarily for the character you're playing, but you as a player who has participated a lot, has GM'd, or has done something to expand the idea of what Pathfinder Society is, you are rewarded with additional options being unlocked.
Right. And they've actually been sort of stealth piloting this idea the last couple of years in both forms of society, where a lot of the really desirable species in Starfinder and races in Pathfinder have been made available on these boon sheets that anybody can just show up to an event that has an adventure officer, like a retail supported one or a convention or just any of them. Just like it, very easy. Just find your local group that does it. And even online is an option. And you can get this like the season-wide species or race boon. And how it works is it has a bunch of check marks on it, 24 check boxes. And GMing gets you 2, playing gets you 1, GMing a module gets you 3, and so on. And there's other ways to do it. And basically, you just play a bunch until you fill up all your checkboxes, and that unlocked this really desirable species. Like Skittermander was introduced this way, as well as the current one is, for those of you who are excited about the upcoming Stellar podcast, lets you play a uplifted bear if you can get 24 points on your species boon.
Which people seem to really love the uplifted bear.
Because it's a bear! Bears are awesome!
But there's a lot of species you could be playing in Starfinder. And yes, okay, bears are awesome, but it's a bear, but it talks. Like, we've seen that before. Aren't there more, like, Starfinder very, very specific races or species that people could also be excited about?
You know what I never got excited about playing in Pathfinder, Ryan? Bears.
Bear.
But now I can be a bear. A bear with a laser gun that summons tech robots and illusions.
So chat's been pretty quiet since the news section started, but as soon as we brought up bear, Aruba's in chat like, bears!
Yes,
All caps,
bears!
exclamation points.
Go check out the art for Stellar. You will. All those characters are amazing.
No, I do enjoy the personality that I'll put into your art for your bear.
Oh yeah. There's
How do
also
you feel about
there's
the
other news.
benefits for Starfinders?
Oh, there's more society news to go along with this. They're also
I was
changed.
just going to say, how do you feel about it overall?
Oh, I like this. There's also another big, even bigger news that's sort of stealth hidden in this. Is that all of this will be tracked online. So you will have, your GM will have to fill the form out online.
Sorry, Param, there's a lot of feedback to what you're doing. I don't know if you're banging your hand, but it's talk.
Hello?
Yeah, there was a lot of feedback.
Okay. Well, your GM will have to fill it out on the website because all of these are required to be tracked online from here on out. And so the little paper copies that we all run around with, because hardly any of our characters are accurate if you look on the website, are not going to cut it anymore.
The internet is old enough that when Pathfinder Society started, and I played in Season 0, and I registered a character, and I realized that was it as far as the online portion of registering a character. Like, I didn't fill out an online character sheet. Like, there was very little internet oversight over what was happening with my character. That really surprised me. And the fact that it's taken this long to integrate it, which I guess you need a major jump on point to do this kind of major change. But it shocked me how little the internet played into the character registration side of it, considering how much it plays into like the adventure, when you declare that the adventure was run, the adventure reporting, like it seemed like an important component, and yet it was a component, but not a tool. Tell me more about this, because I actually totally missed this in the blog post.
Okay, so say your ACP points, which is the achievement points, the meta points. You actually have to use the website to spend them. You have to get them submitted. Your GM has to send in the sheets, and then they'll be added to your account. And then you actually go through basically their online store and will shop for the benefit you want, and it will pre-fill out the form and print it out. That's super important because there has become a black market for these boons in society. Not just legitimate copies of the boons, but people have been doing a fairly good job of counterfeiting them as well and selling them on eBay, etc. And so this is definitely a move meant to specifically counter that behavior.
That's unfortunate. Like, I have traded boons for miniatures before. Like, this was before I realized this was taboo, because it just felt like, this is a race that I don't plan on playing, and somebody is interested in it, so I will trade them that for a miniature that I wanted.
I haven't traded. I have traded boons. I traded because when I got this was back before you could be an Azamar, and I got an Azamar, and my friend got a Dampier, and he really wanted to be an Azamar, so I swapped that. But that's explicitly allowed in the rules, and I've also given away so many boons because I don't play as much as I GM, so I've just given away probably half a dozen race boons over the years.
But yeah, once you get to the point of counterfeiting, that's where I could see, like, that's clearly the line, and I can see why they then have to be particularly strict about things like this and find countermeasures, even if most trades might even be a little more innocent.
Some other news related to Society is they're going to change it to requiring 3 GM sessions to get your 5th star from here on out. So you have to play 100 games, 50 unique scenarios, and instead of just the one audited venture officer watching you play to get your 5th star, you now have to do 3, and there's going to be a actual scoring metric, an actual rubric that you have to be judged on. But they are changing it.
Rubric. I'm surprised because, like, from 5-star GMs that I've talked to, it can be pretty inconvenient getting somebody that is qualified to rate your game, and now having to do it 3 times. Was 5-star GMs just becoming too common?
I don't know. I sure don't think they're very common. It's really hard to find. Well, I live in a really urban area, so and of course I've never gotten the opportunity to run the test. As much as I love Society, I don't have 5-star ready yet.
Sorry, you live in a very rural area.
Yes.
You said urban.
Or did I?
Yes, you did. Well, maybe I just heard wrong.
So I'm trying to bluff check.
Oh. Anyway. I suppose... I don't have any strong feelings about this one way or another. I got to 3 stars and kind of petered out of my Pathfinder Society play. I suppose if I was getting near 5 stars, suddenly having the goalpost shifted might frustrate me, but I'm in a situation where I could be audited by enough, the qualified people, that doesn't bother me as much. But I could definitely see this inconveniencing some people.
Yeah, and it's like in certain parts of the United States, certainly. But remember, it's played globally. Like, what do you do if you're Pathfinder Society in Brazil? Like, I don't know how many. I've just pulled Brazil out of my hat. I don't know. You guys might have a humongous Pathfinder Society thing there, but I have to imagine there are parts of the world where it's like, it's 2 stores in my entire country that are into this. That's not good. So, but they have started to allow online games to count to qualify for it. So before it was restricted to in-person, usually at a convention. Now it is done. You can do so online on a virtual tabletop.
That is good, but that is a separate skill set. And so,
it really is.
Yeah. More options is good, but for some people, it would be effectively the same as not having any options. Someone in chat, Career Nerd, says he has a broad question, but it's PFS related, so I figured we'd cover it now. Never been able to participate in PFS because there isn't a local store within 200 miles of him that participates. Similar
Wow.
to what you just described. Is 200 miles a lot?
That's a lot for even us.
Well, hold on. Isn't that like a 2-hour trip? No, hold on.
No, 200 miles would be almost 4 hours. Not quite 4-hour drive at the speed limit.
Yeah, all right. That's far.
But as the bird flies, it would basically be like several more than that, because usually you have to drive around mountains.
So he says, can they set up PFS in a non-retail situation? And chat has been good about answering the question, but I figured we'd also address it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. PFS does not require a store to play. You can set up a home game PFS. You can do a local club. I know libraries participate in it a lot. You can, and if not, you can probably talk to your public library. They love things like this. And play there, and like I said, play on the home game and online. You can play PFS online. There's online venture officers that are specifically dedicated to supporting that and helping people learn how to get that started. You do not need your store to play PFS. Just download the rulebook off the website and read through it and find out who your venture officers are in the area. I think reaching out to them is a good first step, and they can get you pointed in the right direction.
And by download the rulebook, you mean the Pathfinder Society rules?
Yes.
Field guide.
Yeah, the Pathfinder Society field guide. It keeps getting updated every year, and it explains how the society is organized, and it has pretty much everything you need to play.
Yeah, and I've got a character that I haven't talked about in a while. Funny enough, the last time Crystal was on was when I last talked about it. But Quippy, my gnome that's based on the Joker, and that's just for basically a home game that we decided we're going to make it a Pathfinder Society game.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to exclusively play it at home with this exclusive group of characters over and over again.
Yeah.
It's just totally an option. Yeah.
We did a society game that counts as a society game that we did as a podcast episode.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Twice.
That was a good time. Yep. Next bit of news.
Okay, next bit of news is Starfinder Battles miniatures. This is you would usually.
Finally.
I know it's Starfinder news, but it's big enough news that we wanted to get it out there in the world immediately instead of waiting for a Beyond episode. We will talk about this on Beyond. Do not worry. Hope there's some more pictures by then. But they said 2020 release, formatted like Pathfinder Battles, so random packaging. Iconics are going to have separate blister packs like they do for the iconic characters in Pathfinder Battles. So if you want, if you want basically any of the main characters, they're going to be available in the blister pack. And
well, it's a window box, not a blister pack, right?
Oh, they did switch to window boxes. The first set was blister packs.
Oh yes, with just the 4 iconics. Yeah, but
Yeah.
they moved away from that format a long time ago.
I'm fond of it.
Their terminology is the booster sets, which are the random blind boxes, and then the premium set, which is the window boxes.
Yep. And they're great. So I like them for Pathfinder, so I will like them for Starfinder. And this is especially coming on news in which Eric Mona recently put up a big blog post on the official Paizo forums about the Ninja Division situation. There's not really much that we haven't covered on the show yet, except for he has met with the Ninja Division crew at Gamma, or was it GaryCon? Hit one of the two. It's on the official Paizo website. It was just posted a week ago, and it's basically a very long, very open, very honest account of what happened, why he was confident that they would be able to deliver, why they didn't, that they're going to attempt to still deliver, which is news to me. I thought that they were gone bankrupt. I don't know how this means, that there is a plan in place and deadlines to meet, and things will be re-examined if those are not met. And a lot of frustration, actually a lot of very raw emotion in that post that I'm not used to seeing even from Paizo staffers in their postings. But I understand this is a very serious situation that has a whole lot of people upset and a whole lot of people victimized, and I kind of hope that the best resolution possible is come to. And I do know that seeing another company take over the line, or technically not, they're still going to have the license to finish out the product that they promised they would do for Ninja Division. But to see WizKids, I know that can be disheartening to think that then it really is over. Well, if WizKids is coming out with them, then there's really no hope the thing I paid for is ever going to get to me. Or why should I have to buy a whole new set of miniatures if I already paid hundreds of dollars for a set of miniatures I didn't get?
Plus, the Ninja Division miniatures were going to be a different scale. They're going to be slightly larger than the WizKids one. And the WizKids, I get the impression they're going to be the same size as the Pathfinder Battles one, which will, even if you get, I've got the ones from the Humble Bundle that Ninja Division actually produced, and they're just out of scale. They are interesting shelf items, but I couldn't use them in the game without specifically saying he's a particularly tall version of this character. Eurovana has a question in chat about whether ships will be included. It says that WizKids will be releasing pre-painted iconic heroes and monsters from the Starfinder universe. Conspicuously absent any mention of space combat miniatures. Yeah. This kind of fits in with the timeline and the narrative we have about Starfinder miniatures, because when Ninja Division was announced, and shortly thereafter people pointed out that this was a company with some problems delivering on some at that time recent Kickstarters, a lot of people were saying, why didn't you just go with WizKids, saying this to Paizo? And Eric Mona said WizKids wasn't interested. So this seems like the more cautious first step of just doing figures and not doing any starships, because frankly, from what I hear, Starship combat is quite unpopular in Starfinder, and like devoting an entire line to a system that some people think is just baggage to what Starfinder is otherwise good at. I could understand WizKids not wanting to do that, especially when a lot of like, doesn't the core rulebook even suggest going to the dollar store and getting some cheap plastic miniatures for for Starship Combat?
Yeah, and plus there's like a famous Amazon product that has like 14 different Starship varieties and 72 copies of each for $5 you can get, and when you paint those up, they look dang good.
Plus, WizKids has the Star Wars and Star Trek license, so by not doing Starfinder ones, maybe it's even encouraging people to look at their other lines of starships.
Right, and there's the pawn lines if you need to get ones that match. Now, obviously, it would be better if we had, obviously, ultimately we would really like to see, the iconic starships in miniature form, but this is the first step in that direction if it's successful.
I know someone on our Facebook page was also asking about unpainted plastic miniatures. Nothing like that was announced here, but we do know that WizKids has the Deep Cut line that they have both the Pathfinder and the Dungeons & Dragons licenses for. And I can imagine that if Starfinder Battles is successful, we might get Starfinder Deep Cuts.
Yeah. And at my local store, the Deep Cut lines vastly outsells the pre-painted line.
The Deep Cuts, I don't understand how they're so cheap, because they are amazing.
Yeah, and they're pre-primed, and that's crazy.
All right. Any other final thoughts on this new WizKids license announcement?
No, but I'm going to have to figure out where I'm going to get a few $100 to buy the case set, at least for the first set. I have thousands of fantasy miniatures. I could fit all my sci-fi miniatures into one dice bag.
Wow. At the top of this news item, you said you wanted more pictures, but there are no pictures, right?
Right.
I haven't seen any pictures.
Right.
Of this miniature.
I'm hoping for pictures. Okay. Send us pictures. Darn it. Press release about miniature line and no pictures. Blasphemy. At least draw a stick figure on a base.
Great at is doing 3D model previews of their upcoming miniatures. They usually send those out months in advance. So even though the release date is 2020, I would expect to see those models by Gen Con.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing it.
All right. Ready to move on to a little bit of banter?
Sure. What are we bantering about, Ryan?
Well, we had some interesting banter in Discord today. Today was a big day.
Oh my gosh.
Informing the content of this episode.
Y'all, if you aren't in our Discord, you need to get on that. It's the chillest place to talk about Starfinder and Pathfinder and hang out with the staff, and evidently a whole bunch of Pazonians hanging out there because we aren't our fans are awesome and it's not a toxic waste dump.
So Mark Seifter is a Paizo staffer. He is on the Pathfinder design team. And he's been showing up a lot in our Discord over the last couple of weeks. And at first it was mostly to promote his new show, Arcane Mark, which is him just philosophizing on design. And he talks a little bit about upcoming things in the second edition. So it is a show that I don't fault him for coming here and advertising for it. It's one of the reasons we have the server.
Yeah, well, we have a channel just for advertising that. Here's a hint. If you're a third-party publisher and you want us to know about something, put in the advertiser chat, because I've learned about so much stuff that would have flown over my radar, and then I bring it up on the show because it was cool.
And Arcane Mark is one of those things too, because it's a cool show, and he just started interacting a little bit more with our audience. But today, boy, did he have a lot to say.
Oh man,
we got a lot of specific concerns and just specific criticisms of concerns is the better word. People were worried about what second edition might be like based on the playtest. Param, you were even one of the first people to bring up some of your concerns.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah, like specifically in chat when we were talking about it, we were talking about that how archetypes and feats, which we've talked about on the thing before, is like one of our worries is how all the combat options, at least in the core rulebook, are going to be locked into the classes. And that's because class feats are going to be synonymous with combat feats. honestly, it could have been renamed combat feats and it would have made sense. But and so the solution, at least when the core rulebook drops, is the multi-classing if you need to borrow feats from other independent. And my concern was, well, depending on how easy or hard that is going to be, that's going to affect how I enjoy the customability of the game, and had some concerns. I also said, and also the math in the playtest was broken. They've admitted as much. I'm not putting, there were some problems with the math of the playtest. They've said so. But at the same time, it's like, I'm confident that and I had Mark in mind, actually. Mark stopped to remind me of what I said. I'm confident they can fix the math. And then Mark just jumps in and just starts talking with us, like nothing too spoilery, but a lot of like philosophy and design and history about why certain decisions were made, to kind of really helped explain a lot of Pathfinder, Starfinder, Pathfinder 2, how it was put together and why.
Yeah, it started with Starfinder. Like, one of his big points was wanting to get rid of feat taxes. Mm-hmm. Just completely eliminate feat taxes from any of the games. So it started with Starfinder and he wanted to bring it over to Pathfinder 2. But in Starfinder, he learned that, one, his definition of a feat tax is a lot more restrictive. He thinks of a lot of things as feat taxes that I do not. And so he learned the psychology of why people like choosing an option that specifically impacts their character instead of just all characters being able to do that. And one of the great examples, and probably sparked the most conversation, was talking about precise shot and point blank shot, and how one is definitely a feat tax for the other, and how, why tell people take this feat so you don't take this penalty when you could just eliminate that penalty. And at first he saw it as the thing that let's just get it out of the game and everyone's happier. And then realizing, no, some people do want to be better at these things, but that specific one was being over penalized for not having a feat.
Yeah, I think actually that penalty is going in PF2 and Starfinder doesn't exist. So.
Right, it's just going to be cover now, right?
Yeah, cover's the only thing you work. Because in Pathfinder, when you shoot into melee, you usually have to deal with the melee penalty of they get +4 to their AC, but no, -4 to hit because they're in combat. And then +4 to their AC because your buddy's in the way. You don't want to shoot your buddy in the back of the head.
To which most beginning players I've taught the game to, about half of them will say, well, what if I just risk hitting my buddy in the head? Can I not take it? What if me and my buddy have an understanding? That's just how we shoot into combat.
I'm so glad they got rid of that. In Starfinder and in the playtest, and hopefully in PF2 as well. But cover makes total sense. I mean, I get cover. I think the one that he brought up that really exemplifies this, when he was talking about when the team was working on Starfinder, and in the original version of Starfinder, the basic math assumed what we call weapon focus in Starfinder. And weapon focus doesn't do what it does in Pathfinder. It's not a +1 to hit with a weapon. It gives your character basically your level, or more than your level, depending on the class of weapon, bonus to damage with those weapon types. That was just in the core math in a version of the game, and evidently players didn't find that satisfying, and so they added weapon focus so that the players could opt in to being good at the guns instead of just automatically being good at the guns they were proficient with. And that made it felt like meaningful choices, even though situationally characters aren't going to use guns they're bad with, and everybody takes weapon focus. Actually, every class just gives you weapon focus for the base classes, but if you want to learn to use a weapon that isn't part of your class, you have to take the weapon focus feat as well as proficiency. But making those choices, giving you that agency, deciding to not be bad at this in exchange for being bad at
Mark
that.
Mark is in chat. Mark showed up in chat while we're talking about the Mark Seifter.
Specialization. I got it backwards. Sorry, Mark. I got that backwards.
Mark, I love that you just appear. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Param, I cut you off, but it sincerely tickled me that I guess somebody told him we were talking about him, or maybe he was listening. And
Mark's in a lot of the episode audiences. Yeah, well, he's hosting.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah, we're mutually auto-hosting Mark. Thanks for fixing that, Mark. Sorry, I confused it with weapon specialization. But either way, by making that an active choice in the game, making that a feat again, it made it feel like a meaningful choice, and players liked it better than when they just got it. Which
yeah,
kind
and
of ties.
even when I'm told, but the math makes sense both ways, and it's like the choice is meaningless because everyone will be taking the choice. It's still, I still totally just want to be able to make that choice.
Yeah. And this ironically ties back to our disagreement and pulled me to your side of the ability score argument we had a couple of episodes ago, where you were like, you want the freedom to be bad at something. And it's like being good at something is meaningless if you're not bad, if you didn't have the ability to be bad at something.
I liked the metaphor I came up with in the chat where, yeah, there we go. I prefer a new character to be a lump of clay and not a blank canvas. And it has flaws until you choose where and how to smooth them out. If its base setting is flawless, then what you add from there lacks dimension. Pretty proud of that one.
And understanding the psychology behind that made me understand your point, and honestly, I'm on your side on this one now.
Yeah. And also, you hate backstories, right?
No. I don't think
That's
they should be. Let me rephrase this. I don't think players should be forced to have backstories, but I sure like them when I get them.
There we go. So we agree that players should not be forced to have them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, tell me something so that I can work it in. If it's just like, I like swords. Just like, how did you... like, your character has to make sense in character when you're playing him. But if that's on the cuff when we're playing, that's great. And if it's something you gave me in advance that we worked on, that's also great. Just be a good role player.
So I think we've summarized a few of his larger points, and it's really... Mark Seifter's not a guy that you can summarize. You really do yourself a favor, go check it out. Maybe we'll even pin the first post that sparked this conversation, so that if people go into the Pathfinder 2E chat in our Discord, you check the pinned messages, and you will be able to follow that whole conversation, because it really is an insightful chat, and it was some of the most exciting stuff I've read about second edition in a long time.
I mean, it's not often you get to... When you're talking to somebody and you recognize them, oh, you are a foremost expert in your field. You have studied something. You know it. You are a font, a source of knowledge, of primary knowledge on a subject. And Mark Seifter is one of those people. When you get to talk to him at a convention, you realize that you are in the presence of a rarity, of actual greatness. And to see... his conversation in our chat, it was just an example of when a discussion goes from just casually speculative to, no, let's get our peer review in here.
So I have just pinned Aziz, AZIH, their comment about didn't like PlaySex's concept of marrying fighting styles to character classes. Might not be the exact starting point of the conversation, but it was definitely... shortly before that, shortly thereafter, Mark Seifter jumped in.
Yeah. So it was great. It was wonderful. And another example of why y'all need to be on our chat room. It's free. You can do it without downloading any software. Just go to nodirectionpodcast.com. There's a Discord link on the side. Click that. It's great. We want to have you in our chat. We want to talk with you. And the more people there, the richer the conversation gets.
Speaking of conversation, Param, we started early, so we are actually running a little long right now.
Oh my gosh, yes we are.
This is a good time to wrap things up.
I think so.
All right, so thank you for joining us for another episode of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Thank you for Crystal Fraser for joining us, because like Param was talking about, Mark as a expert and a font of knowledge in a topic, it ends up that Crystal is even more qualified to be the guest in this episode than I originally thought. I just got the impression that she was good at cartoons. No, she is studied at cartoons. She's a cartoon wizard, not a cartoon sorcerer. Before we go, I do want to give some shout outs. I don't know why I said it so slowly. There's a couple of podcasts that, since we were talking about cartoons, people might want to check out. One of them is the Gameable podcast. Specifically an episode Crystal Fraser is on. The Gameable podcast, every episode or every couple of episodes, they do a deep dive into a single cartoon and talk about how to turn it into a RPG. It's basically this topic as a full podcast. They've got like 100 episodes. Crystal was on episode 49 where they talked about Ninja Turtles and how to develop a Ninja Turtle plot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Gameable Podcast, GameAble. Also, Dan Larson was recently on What's on Joe Mind. Dan Larson hosts a YouTube channel called Toy Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot like the Toys That Made Us documentary on Netflix without the weird snarky tone that show sometimes takes.
Yeah, it's glorious. I love every episode I watch of it.
Of which one? Toys
Toys
That Made Us
Galaxy.
or
No,
Toy Galaxy? Yeah,
yeah.
Same here. He hasn't been doing it for that long, but it really feels like in the last year he's been getting a lot of attention. He's fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically a two-man operation, as he explains in this episode of What's on Joe Mind, which is Special Edition 57, which is the first time I've heard him interviewed. And one, he's a big fan of G.I. Joe. And two, he just somebody who started a thing and got good at it and got attention. And it's just, I like that kind of story. I like him as a person. He just seems sincere and everything. And if you want to know more about him, kind of in the same way that he goes into the story behind a lot of the toy lines you like, this was a really good episode of What's on Joe Mind. And then finally, earlier today, I listened to an episode of The Full Force with Word Burglar on it. Word Burglar is a rapper who raps mostly about 80s cartoons, franchises, and whatnot. He had a whole album about G.I. Joe called, was it Welcome to Cobra Island or Welcome to the Terrordrome? I think it was called Welcome to Cobra Island. He's got some new Star Wars inspired ones coming out on May 4th. And I've run in the same circles as Word Burglar because he's from Toronto and a lot of my G.I. Joe friends are from Toronto. But this was the first time I heard him formally interviewed, and it's a fun interview. He's a really interesting guy. There are not too many people out there like the Word Burglar who has been doing this professionally for like 15 years. It's insane that he's filling this tiny niche, but he does it really well. So check out the Full Force podcast. Let's see, what episode number is it? I don't have it here. But Full Force is an Action Force podcast, technically. Action Force being the British version of G.I. Joe. Okay, so there is no episode number to it. Just search Full Force Word Burglar, all one word, WORDBURGLAR, and odds are you're going to find it. Param, any shoutouts?
Just pay attention to news about the upcoming conventions. You'll definitely see us there, and we'll have more to talk about on that later. But I hope I get to see a lot of our fans at PaizoCon and Gen Con this year.
Speaking of which, Luis is in chat saying 30 days to PaizoCon, which one, wow. But
Yep.
two, I don't know if we can take that as the official number of days till PaizoCon.
Right.
This doesn't come from the PaizoCon countdown correspondent, Darren Galdemeyer. We will wait for his confirmation that Luis is right that it's 30 days till PaizoCon. But if that is correct, that's not a lot of days till PaizoCon, Param.
No, it sure isn't. PaizoCon's almost here. A lot of us are making plans. I got all my hotel stuff done. Me and Alex are going to get a whole day in Seattle to just goof off because it's cheaper to fly in a day early than flying in the day of, by such an extent that I was able to pay for my hotel room and still save $200, which is ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what Thursday flights will get you. Or Wednesday.
Wednesday. It was a Wednesday. So I'm flying in on Tuesday instead.
That's cool. I haven't booked my flight, Param. I am committed to going. I even have a couple of meetings booked, but I have no other PaizoCons plans finalized, which feels weird, but that was just the kind of year it was.
Nah, this thing's cool to just hang out at. That's what I did last year, and it was just so much fun.
Yeah,
chilling
I
in
think that if I
couches,
miss
talking with
PaizoCon,
fans and
the thing I
Paizo
would regret
peeps.
the most is just chilling with people that I rarely get an opportunity to chill with.
And playing Skittermanders with Jason Keeley. That was awesome.
Yeah, I believe it. Maybe I'll get some Starfinder in this year.
But you already know that playing with Jason Keeley's awesome.
Oh, yeah, that I know. It was the Skittermanders that I was like, yeah, all right, I see the appeal. But yeah, no, Jason's a fun guy to play with. Editing the podcast, Jason will often have comments that get a little overpowered by the rest of us. And so I get to appreciate what he's contributing even more in the editing process and make sure that we don't have so much overlapping, because I guess just a lot of us have similar comedic timing, and he just gets a little dominated by people with louder voices. Not exclusively me, but often.
Well, there's also the podcaster advantage. We are used to asserting ourselves in audio format.
Yes, we are. I thought I was going to cut you off.
No, because I suspected it.
Well, I just got anxious when there was just too much dead air. It's weird, Parham. This episode's getting weird.
I'm editing all the silence out. You're the only one that's experiencing it.
there's
And
still
there's
live
17
audience
audience
with
members. No, but check us out. Also, if you want to find out anything more about the network, including our amazing blog content, you can do so at NoDirectionPodcast.com, where you'll find 2 links on the side. One to the fabled Discord server that we've already talked about several times, as well as a link to our Patreon. Thank you all that support us on Patreon. It's only through your support that we are able to do what we do here at the network. We are able to keep this show going. We appreciate it, and because of your efforts, we've been able to expand it to include multiple new podcasts and bring on some more team members and get some equipment that's going to make some of these travel plans and ambitions we have for the conventions possible. And we just would not be able to keep doing all we do without your help. If you want to help, you can find the Patreon link at NoDirectionPodcast.com or go to Patreon.com/NoDirection, where you can pledge in at a myriad of different levels to support the show.
I just received confirmation via our Facebook inbox from Darren Caldemeyer that today is, in fact, 30 days till PaizoCon.
It's official! Put it up on the calendar!
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Parham.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.